I've been using this Super Metroid outro for the entire run of this channel, so I like Metroid, right? Well, yeah. Ever since I got into these games as a teenager, it didn't take long for it to be one of my favorite series. They have this awesome gameplay loop that I never get tired of, and the atmosphere they give off is just, so good. But my first experience with this series wasn't good, let me tell you. Because my first Metroid was the first Metroid. I got a 3DS a few months after launch for the big $80 price drop. To compensate early adopters, Nintendo made the 3DS Ambassador program. Anyone who bought the system before that big price drop got 10 free NES games for everyone else, and 10 free Game Boy Advance games that never got put up in the 3DS eShop for purchase. The NES side, I didn't get much use out of. I played Zelda 2 a bit. I enjoyed doing that. I also played some Metroid, but wasn't into it. Although I knew the first game was still rough around the edges, I was still willing to try out Fusion when I would get to that later in the year. And I loved it, but I'll get to gushing about that in a few weeks. Because I figured it's finally time to talk about these games. At least the 2D ones. It's the series' 35th anniversary, so what better way to celebrate? You know Nintendo's not going to. God, I hope I'm wrong. Close enough. Anyway, Metroid 1 on the NES. I've barely played this one. Every time I try to get into it, I just get lost and not have the motivation to continue. It felt archaic to me, a game from a bygone era, so I just never felt the need to deep dive into it. But hey, in honor of seeing these games evolve over time, let's actually sit down and play it. I'm honestly expecting these first two games to be hard. Not in the difficulty sense, more like hard to stomach. A lot of NES and Game Boy games haven't aged gracefully and just feel old. I might enjoy them though, who knows. Anyways, I've been saying see a next mission for ages, so let's actually start one of those missions. Alright, so basically, Metroid's story goes like this. A bunch of leaders of alien planets got together one day and formed the Galactic Federation to make a bunch of cool sci-fi stuff. Earth was like,
hey, can we have some of that?
And the Federation was like,
yeah, sure.
All was well in the galaxy until the space pirates came along and ruined everything. They kept looting ships, stealing and pillaging a bunch of stuff, and just decided to be rambunctious in general. By the way, these weren't just random-ass aliens either. There was an entire race of these things, called the Space Pirates. So yeah, that's a thing. They even got their own homeworld. The Galactic Federation was having none of that, so they made a police force to try and stop them. But the Space Pirates were too powerful, so the Federation gave their police a bunch of super weapons, called them hunters, and that worked apparently. At least a little bit. One of these Space Pirate raids, their almost leader Ridley, killed little Samus Aran's parents, so she was raised by a race of bird people called the Chozo. They infused her with Chozo DNA, trained her to have near superhuman acrobatics, gave her this fancy power suit, and then she became a hunter for the Galactic Federation. After figuring out that she can do this on a regular basis, the Federation just decided to send this one-woman army into the heart of the space pirate base on Zebes and kill their leader, Mother Brain. Yeah, their leader is just some brain in a tube somewhere. They're cloning a bunch of alien parasites that killed off the Chozo or something, so you gotta go stop them. What are these parasites called, you may ask? Metroid. The game itself, though, has literally nothing. It's an NES game. Metroid's main contribution to society becomes apparent pretty quick. When you start out, you're pathetic. You just have this dinky blaster that has low range and barely does any damage. You keep moving right, and you even come up to a dead end. Your average 80's player would have just been like, wait, what do I do? Why can't Metroid crawl? Well, Metroid introduces the revolutionary concept of moving left. You couldn't even go backwards in Super Mario Bros., and now we have a game that's built around it. Because in realizing this is an option at all, you find Metroid's main shtick immediately. Gaining new abilities. Because now that you have the Morph Ball, you can go through the hole in the wall, and the game just opens up from there. You can go anywhere. As long as you have the right abilities, of course. Just like with the Morph Ball letting you go through narrow tunnels, missiles give you more firepower with limited ammo and let you open red doors. The Ice Beam lets you freeze enemies and use as platforms. The High Jump boots let you jump higher. Your main form of progression is gaining new abilities, which let you reach new areas or find more abilities, along with increasing your missile capacity and health. Metroid is essentially an action and adventure game in the form of a side-scrolling platformer. Because Metroid and later Castlevania Symphony of the Night were the first to adopt this style of gameplay, the subgenre is generally called Metroidvania, and I love this kind of gameplay loop. It was a great sense of power growth. You start out as a weakling, but you quickly gain the screw attack, which lets you one-shot most enemies just by jumping into them. The Various suit also doubles your defense, so between these two upgrades, you feel totally invincible by comparison. It makes you want to explore everything everything and get as overpowered as you possibly can. Metroid had that kind of vision in 1986, and that core gameplay loop is still there even in the first attempt at a game like this. Just by exploring and trying to find the way forward, you'll likely find this gate that you can't progress through until you beat both major bosses of the game, which you can fight in either order. You can even get every major upgrade in the game before fighting a single one. Seriously, you have a surprising amount of freedom for a game on NES. It really reminds me of the first Zelda in that regard. It's incredible what they were able to do so early on in the NES's life, and I respect the first Metroid a lot because of that. But you can easily tell this is the first game of its kind, because first of all, there's no map, and most areas look very similar, sometimes even looking like the exact same room copy-pasted somewhere else. Now, at first, I was oddly into a mapless Metroidvania. The way I enjoy these games basically live and die with their map system. If the map's good, the game's good. If the map is confusing or unintuitive, it's not fun for me. It's the main reason I couldn't get into Hollow Knight at first. In that game, the map is only updated when you rest at a save point, so you're essentially running around blind when you go into a new room. Not only that, but you first have to find the map of the area and buy it before you can start jotting down where you've been. I hated that at first. I practically live on the map screen in these kinds of games. But after I looked past that and tried to know my surroundings, I found that oddly engaging, and I knew how to get around much better as a result. I was hoping that I could find a similar enjoyment in OG Metroid, and I did. At first. The first area of the game was pretty easy to figure out just with my own short-term memory, but the issues arose when I stopped playing. I came back the next day forgetting basically everything. These two big vertical shafts are at least different colors, but everything else is so samey that it all blends together and it's hard to figure out where you are. Even when I'm looking at a fan-made map, yeah, I used a guide for this game, and save states. I'm not crazy. Because the thing is, I get that it's the NES, I get that they wanted to make your own maps, but that's stupid and I'm not doing it. The only reason why I wasn't completely lost was because I've played Metroid games so many times that I already had a vague understanding of what I was looking for. If this was my first Metroid, I'd be lost as soon as I left the starting cave. And I was. I might have gotten missiles on my first time playing back in the day, maybe the long beam, but that was it. I doubt I even stepped foot past Brinstar. And that's not even mentioning how I start out with 30 health when you die, forcing you to farm for health when you're low. There's these little farming spots that have enemies infinitely respawn, but it's still agonizingly slow, and they respawn the instant you grab their pickup. So it's pretty often I get hit just trying to get my energy or missile. And keep in mind that each health pickup restores 5 energy, and if you get hit, you usually lose 10. Which doesn't sound like a big deal, but when the enemies come out in such awkward spots, it happens pretty often. You might occasionally find a pickup that restores 20 energy, but with the enemies that infinitely respawn out of these little holes, they only give you 5. And sometimes the game just outright refuses to give you more health no matter how many you kill. So pretty much every time you die, you have to spend like 10 to 20 minutes doing this tedious task just to get back to full health. Which I usually just skipped and decided to deal with the low health, like the good at video games person that I am. It's much quicker once you get the screw attack, but it's still so slow. The only way to fully recharge your health, as far as I know, is to get an energy tank to increase it, which there are only like 7 of. So between having to do this whenever you die or load up your password, not knowing where you're supposed to go, playing OG Metroid is very discouraging. It's really easy to just put the controller down and stop playing. The maze-like world design doesn't mesh well with not being able to keep track of where you are. It almost feels like the game's constantly pushing back against you, like it doesn't want you to finish it. For a kid in the 80s, it could have been really enjoyable to devote yourself to figuring out everything in this game, because you reasonably could as long as you're willing to write everything down. But that was 35 years ago. This game's old enough to have a midlife crisis. There's pretty much no reason to play it in today's gaming landscape when there's a bazillion other games that do the same thing better. I only stayed sane due to the fact that I was using a guide. There was even one point where after 30 minutes it felt like I made no progress, and I actually decided to do schoolwork instead because it felt like the more enjoyable alternative. So why the hell did I really like this game? I honestly don't know, but maybe I can try to explain it. At the game's core, it's still Metroid. It's still a style of game that I enjoy a lot, so even in the series' unrefined state, I was still able to find an enjoyable time to my surprise. I expected Metroid to be a slog, a cryptic, unfun mess of a game. But when you actually know what you're doing, or if someone else explains it to you, it's this weird 80's kind of fun, like having someone tell you the rules to a board game or Dungeons & Dragons or something. Because once the game gets going, it gets going. You get every major ability, you tear Kraid apart, Ridley goes down like a little bitch despite having the power to slow down time itself, and it's finally time to destroy Mother Brain. But not before you swap out the Wave Beam for the Ice Beam and deal with these stupid Metroids. Yeah, beams don't stack in the first 2 games. So if you need the ability to freeze things instead of having the wave beam superior damage output, then you have to go back to where the other beam is. It's dumb. Like, really dumb. Start doesn't do anything except for pausing the game. Why can't you just swap out your beams in a simple menu? You only have to do this once, but it still doesn't make any sense why you need to. But anyway, after going through the final hallway of parasites to get to the final boss, which feels like more of an endurance test than a boss, Mother Brain doesn't attack you directly. There's a bunch of orbs and lasers in the way that you have to dodge while you destroy each door with missiles? I don't know what these things are, I never have. Then you do the same thing to Mother Brain itself. It'll take you a few tries, but it's not too bad of a fight. Just boring. And if you lose, you start at the beginning of the area with 30 health just like usual. But the Metroids drop decent health and ammo, so it's not as annoying as it could be. After beating Mother Brain, the planet's about to explode, so you very carefully jump up this long corridor so you don't die. Well, that's nothing to worry about. They gave you way more time than you need. Anyway, you complete your mission, bringing peace to the galaxy once more, but it may be invaded by the other Metroid. I don't know what that means. Probably just setting up for Super Prime, I don't know. It was the NES, whatever. What I really like though is you get a slightly different ending depending on how long you took to finish the game. If you take longer than 10 hours, you get Samus crying away from the camera, okay. 5 to 10 hours gets you a fist bump, like, yeah, we did it. But if you finish in 3 to 5 hours, Samus takes off her helmet and she's a girl? Although it's the 80s, that could have been a dude. Nope, that is definitely a female. Like, seriously, why the hell do you get Samus in a bikini when you finish in under an hour? I like the jumpsuit ending for 1 to 3 hours better, personally. Like, I know this would be a common thing for the series at the point where Zero Suit has 2 ults for it in Smash, but it always felt kind of weird to me. Not really a bad thing, just something that personally ever so slightly bothered me. But if you happen to be playing this game in the 80s, this was a really cool subversion of expectations. I doubt Samus was the first female protagonist of a video game, but most people just kinda assume there was a dude under that suit. And aside from the manual referring to Samus as he, there was never anything saying whether Samus was male or female. Most people just assume Samus was a man, and when you see they were actually playing as a woman the whole time, a normal person would have been like, hey, that's cool. And that's just about the best female protagonist you can have. It doesn't really matter what their gender is, they just happen to be female. It's obviously no secret nowadays, which is why I didn't bother trying to hide it, but it was a cool twist back then. And I doubt it would have the same impact nowadays, which is probably a good thing. There's like a bajillion good female protagonists in video games now, and I hope I don't have to explain why that's awesome. There isn't really much to do afterwards. Maybe put in the Justin Bailey code to play through the game without your suit and all your upgrades, but that's about it. Alternatively, you can play the Japanese Famicom Disk System version. It's a slightly better version of the game with save data, enhanced music, and less lag, which is nice, but it doesn't really matter which version you play. They're about the same. Anyway though, Metroid. About what I expected, honestly. Sure, I didn't expect to enjoy it like I did, but I only liked it because I like this kind of game. If you've never played a Metroid game in your life and you want to start with the first game, just play Zero Mission. It's a damn good remake that I'll be getting into in a separate video. But if you're still interested in the OG Metroid, it's really one of those games that's only fun with a guide. It's too cryptic without one. Not quite Zelda 1 cryptic, but you'll definitely test your patience to its limits. But hey, I get it. Metroid was the first of its kind, so it was expected to have a game so rough around the edges at first. Besides, it only gets better from here. Next up is Metroid 2, which was on Game Boy for some reason. I was actually able to get like 3/4 of the way through it back in the day, so it probably won't be so bad. Till then, take care everyone, I'll see you all next mission.